Ready? I'm
Well, I
ready.
thought about it.
But you know, with all this technology,
Yeah.
these blackbirds and these pens don't work with the dam. You'd think it would be better, huh? I guess you gotta really learn how to do
You
that.
gotta take the cap off, Jerry.
Is it Blair? No, let me put my. There. Is that better or less? I wish you.
He didn't get it, did he?
Were you in your last night?
Alright, good afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure of introducing this young man over here. This gentleman has served as a livestock extension educator for Southeast Wyoming since 2001. Him and a colleague developed the High Plains Practicum School, an 8-day ranch management school focusing on systems to ranch decision making. His topic for you today is following the drought, what will I use to restock? Ladies and gentlemen, Dallas Mount.
Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. You don't know if it's gonna be good yet.
My expectations.
Yeah. Well, pleased to be with you again today. And I recognize a lot of familiar faces in the room. That's nice. I'd like to let you guys take this talk wherever you'd like for it to go. This is a set of slides John and I put together for a deal we did back in August, but I don't plan to stick to those by any means. I guess what I'd like to do is kind of get a feel for where you guys are at, what you're thinking about, and then we can take the talk where it'll be most useful to you. How many of you in the room are college students? Okay, and you guys are ag production, business management. What are you studying?
Natural resource biology.
Natural resource biology. All right, excellent. So, what about you?
Ag production.
Ag production. Okay. All right, good. And the rest of you are producers primarily? Okay. Most of you livestock, mixed livestock farming enterprises, livestock only, farming only, mix. Okay. All right. Okay. I was kind of surprised this morning. I asked the room, and it didn't seem like the drought was as bad or as widespread up here as it was. What do you? How bad did you get? Is it mostly a dryland drought this year? Your rangeland production was off?
There was good water. We had good water in Buffalo.
Okay. So you had good surface irrigation water, huh?
130,000 acres or whatever didn't suffer.
Okay. All right.
Even up on the mountains, the national forest leases were good.
Okay.
Because of
BLM was
snowpack, we had
terrible.
great snowpack.
Okay.
But anything dryland or desert was done in June.
Okay. All right. So in terms of impact on your operations, were most of you able to sustain it pretty well? Did you sell down cows a bit, or you pretty good shape? Okay. All right. Well, good. That's well, you guys are in a lot better shape than we are. I wanted to show you some. Let me bring that up. Bye.
Right there, yeah.
All right. Look at that. What a difference a year can make. And you guys are probably on some of your desert country. This is dryland ground north of Torrington, Wyoming, about 40 miles or so. Really good grass country for us. This is, typical western wheatgrass, needle and thread grass. This was June of 2011. I was out doing some range monitoring with a producer out there. And many of you probably do this on your ranches. Stretch out a tape measure, that's 100-foot tape, and then take pictures along that at different intervals and looking at plant density, species composition, some of those things. But it does also give a good idea of production. And then we went back to the same place. So I'm trying to remember on this particular pasture, I don't think he'd been in there yet that growing season. He would have come in probably shortly after that picture. It's pretty much just a growing season grazing on this. They just mostly do summer grazing. So he would have come in and pretty well taken that forage, but it would have been after seed set, so pretty easy on the grasses. And then here we are, we went out there this year, and he hadn't had any cattle in this pasture before this picture. So
Now, I have a question.
Yes.
We went down to Front View last week in July. All the time as we were going down, it was looking terrible. When we got to about Wheatland, the hills got green, even though they were complaining like in Cheyenne with no rain. I mean, did you guys miss that cut?
I wonder if you were seeing some blue grama green up. Did we recently have a spring or a summer?
It just looked way better.
Okay. Around Wheatland, we were really bad. South of Wheatland, towards Chugwater, they hit some of those showers, just in little pockets, and maybe they got a little green. There wasn't very much production, so that's why I'm wondering if it was just some of the blue grama greening up that might have.
It sure looked a lot better than everything we've been through till we got there.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it was tough. This was some of the toughest country I saw last year. But
Well, that'd be pretty good for here.
yeah.
When can we try that?
It's all location, isn't it? But I kind of look at those pictures. Look at see the cow pie? Watch it here. There it still is.
Wow.
Same cow pie. Right there. So
That truck stay there all year?
yeah. You look at the tires on the rear tires on the pickup. It gives you an idea in terms of the stature of the forage, doesn't it? A couple of those tufts of crested wheatgrass. It would have been about right in there in this picture. They didn't eat the crested wheatgrass. But, yeah. Anyway, that's the kind of thing we're facing in southeastern Wyoming, and I imagine you guys have some interesting things. So maybe in light of hearing your situation, we could talk about how might you guys position yourselves to take advantage of what some of the rest of the state and the country is facing. Everybody was at lunch and saw the drought monitor deal he put up. I don't need to pull that back up. You know, I think that's interesting to watch. Those drought monitors, they're generally way behind in terms of what we know is going on the ground. You know, at least in our country, and I know up here, you guys are heavily dependent on cool season grasses on your rangeland. So what are the critical decision points on your ranches? What are the months you're watching for your rangeland forage production in terms of precip?
Kind of around the early spring.
Yeah. Okay, so do things start in late March up here? Maybe just a little bit of something under the ground, and then, okay, April, May, and June probably are your biggies, huh? Yeah, I would guess so too. And that's kind of where we're at. So, you know, if you look back at the drought monitor in June last year, it wasn't showing hardly anything. Well, we knew there was going to be a bad year come June 1. I mean, we already knew that. So I think looking at those drought monitor things kind of give you some big picture perspectives, but they sure don't give you much indication as to what's happening on your place. You ought to know that well ahead of the time that thing gets dark red. So I guess that's where I'd like to take this, is maybe what are some critical decision points on your operations. Let's visit too. I've got a bias, I guess, as to how I think ranches should consider stocking themselves in terms of what percent of your AUMs, your animal unit months, you might tie up in cattle versus what percent might be something, or cows versus what percent might be something more flexible, and then maybe some strategies to do that with. Would that be beneficial? Is that what you guys? Okay, let's talk about that some then too. Okay. John Britton is on the schedule tomorrow, and he's kind of a funny looking guy with a ponytail and a goatee, and you can tell him I said that. But he really knows his stuff when it comes to looking at these long-term drought plans, and he's got some really interesting system dynamic data on that. So if you have a chance tomorrow, stop into his talk and listen to him. But I won't bore you with going through those slides. Let's get on the same page about how we're going to talk about the financials of a ranch. And if you were in the session this morning, I see only a couple familiar faces. So we'll go ahead and go back through these if you guys will bear with me. So if we look here, my writing's still up here, at a ranch, and this ranch might run cows, keep those calves over to stockers, put up some hay. That would be the bulk of what this ranch does. There's really 4 enterprises mixed into this ranch, and so we'll have the cow-calf side, we'll have the stocker side, we'll do our hay production, and then we also have the land business, okay? This one can be a funny one to think about, because what essentially we're doing is we're saying, this ranch, even if we didn't put up hay, we didn't run stockers, and we didn't own our own cows, this is a business in itself, okay? And the best way to think about that is, if we cash lease this ranch out, what would it be worth? Okay, what's the grass on our ranch worth before we put a single cow on it, drive our swather across it, okay? But then also, are there costs to that? And here's an example ranch I want to show you and how we look at those economics. We use the lug nut ranch here. Okay, so this ranch essentially has 12,000 acres of upland. We called it 0.33 AUMs per acre. That's just an AUM is 800 pounds. So if this ranch were harvesting a third of 800 pounds off of an acre, so a couple hundred pounds per acre is what we were putting in a cow. Some meadow ground, some riparian ground. We're producing 4,910 AUMs. Think of an AUM as a half a ton of hay stuck in a cow's belly. Okay, an AUM is 800 pounds. So think of it as just about a half a ton of hay that's in the cow's belly. That's what your ranch produces, is AUMs or pounds of grass or tons of hay. We're just going to call it AUMs. I said if that AUM's worth 20 bucks, then this year that ranch produced about $98,000 worth of gross income product. Okay, so we could cash lease this ranch out, and we can say, hey, you can run enough cows till you've grazed our uplands, you can graze all of our meadows, or you can put up hay on it, or you can have our riparian areas, so whatever, however you want to split that down. But what we expect you to pay for the forage value of our ranch is about $98,000. Okay, so you see how that land business can be treated as a standalone enterprise? And then what we're going to do is, as we start laying these other enterprises on there, they're going to pay this land business for what they're using. Okay? Any questions on that? Because that can be kind of a different way of looking at things if you're not used to talking about it that way. Of course, we have some production costs. The land business is going to pay land tax. They're going to set aside some money every year to dues, pipelines for stock tanks, fencing projects, whatever that might be. Maybe they're in an irrigation district and have to pay for irrigation water. Utilities, hired labor, so a portion of the hired labor for the whole ranch is going to be allocated to the land business. Fuel costs, same way. We're going to have some overhead, things like upkeep on ranch houses, upkeep on corrals, those kind of things that the land business is going to pay. So on this particular ranch, if this ranch had $98,000 worth of gross income from the land business, then we also had $57,000 worth of costs. At the end of the day, that land business generated $41,000 to the bottom line of the ranch. Okay? The reason I'm showing you this is I think this becomes important as we start making these drought management decisions onto what we destock, is knowing the financial performance of each of these different enterprises. Okay? So let's take a look at how everything else did. I don't want to go through each of those businesses because I'm afraid I'd bore you to death. If you're interested in seeing how we do some of those financials for a particular enterprise, let me know and we'll run back through that particular one. Okay, here's the land business we just talked about. Okay, can you guys see that? All right, good. $98,000 gross income, $57,000 total cost. So at the end of the day, that land business generated $41,000 to the bottom line of the ranch. This ranch is in a pretty bad drought this year. I put the drought scenario on there. So we've got cows that sold. We sold down a big chunk of the cow herd, so we had nice gross income this year in terms of cash income to the ranch because we were selling those cows. But then we took them off of our balance sheet, so we devalued the total value of our herd. So we just kind of offset that. We traded cows for cash. Okay. We bought a lot of hay for these cows this year. That's what most ranches I work with did. They traded cows for hay. Okay. So we had high cash expenses. So the cow business on this ranch, looking at 2012, lost $84,000. Okay. That was our total gross income, total cost. That's what the cow business did. Now this ranch keeps every calf. It's about a 300 cow ranch. In a normal year, they're able to carry those calves over, graze them out. What we do is in November, we value every calf at what a weaned calf is worth. We give that money to the cow-calf business. The stocker business buys those stockers. Okay, they just transferred enterprises. They're still in the same ranch, but these calves went from this business to this business. And on the way we handled it here was just November 1 that happens. Okay, we're valuing them, we're moving them. And they'll be in this business until they're sold as grass cattle whenever that happens. Yes, sir.
How do you charge out your preconditioning things to go to on?
Okay,
Who pays for, where's that?
If it was after the 1st of November, which it probably is on this ranch, let's just say we wean the calves on that day, then all those costs are under the stocker business. The way this ranch is set up is it's a really low input stocker operation. Those calves are weaned, maybe they're doing a fence line wean for a few days. Cows are shipped off, calves graze out all winter long. Okay? A little bit of protein supplement just to keep them alive. And then they're ready for green grass next year. But if it were a preconditioned or a background type of deal, in the yard or something, we charge that into that stocker business. We might call it even something different. Yes, sir.
So in your enterprise accounting, that $51,000 for your stockers, that's the value of the calves on November 1st? Is that what I'm understanding you to say? Because I can understand why you would transfer it, but where's the value of your calves in November if you don't account it for it in that costs?
That blue sheet I was just showing you pulls the summary numbers from this sheet. This is my stocker enterprise. On November 1st, I bought 137 head of steer calves, 166 head of heifer calves. That was my total outlay for calves, 231. Not sure why that's not. Let me see what my summary tab says here, because it.
So when you say you bought them, you actually just moved them from one enterprise to the other?
Exactly.
Okay.
There wasn't a check wrote, we just traded values. Gross income, total cost. I know what it does, is there's that gross income. We bought them for 231, we sold them for 316. What we're calling our gross income is this 85,000. That's what's pulled over in that blue sheet you're seeing.
Okay.
So I'm not looking at the total outlay of cash for this enterprise. Yeah. All right.
So what did the cow calf enterprise do?
The cow-calf enterprise lost $84,000 in 2012. And if we would look at back to 2011, it would have been a little bit probably made $20,000. I think 2010, it might have done a little better than that. 2009 probably was a rough year on it. So it would have variation over a 5-year average. It would be pretty much a break-even enterprise on this particular ranch. That's one interesting thing is there's huge swings between ranches. When people say is running cows profitable? Well, yeah, for a lot of guys it's really profitable. For most guys, no, it's a losing enterprise. So it's hard to give generalizations on those things.
Do you have wheat pasture?
I don't have any wheat pasture models in here. No. Okay, so on our stockers, we bought these stockers in the fall. This drought and I'm thinking here Southeast Wyoming, we knew things were bad in June. First couple weeks in June, we pulled the trigger on these stockers and they left. So we got lucky this year and hit that market before it took a dive. If we'd have waited 2 more weeks, this stocker number probably would have been negative. Okay, so this year our stockers hit a pretty good lick. We made $33,000 on our stockers on this ranch. Our hay business, we didn't get the irrigation water supplies we'd hoped for. Didn't get spring rains to bring up our first cutting. Our hay production was half of what it would be in a normal year. If we're carrying overheads to justify hay production, I think this ranch only puts up 400 ton of hay. It's not a very big hay producing ranch. If we're carrying those overheads to justify that and we're only putting up half the hay, we're still going to be paying those overheads, only putting up half the hay, so it's going to make that business pretty tough. So we're buying the hay. I think in this year we did 200 tons. We bought 200 tons for $200 a ton. That wouldn't be right. Somewhere like that. There's our gross income. Our total costs were $53,000. So our hay business lost $33,000 this year on this ranch. Okay, so the reason I'm showing you this is I think it's very important at the end to look at more than just that bottom line number. If all we did is walk into our tax accountant and say, hey, here's my books, how did my ranch do this year? He's going to say, well, you lost $44,000. Okay? What he's not going to be able to show us is, well, your cows lost $84,000, your land business made $40,000, even though it was a dry year and you only produced half the grass you would normally. Your stocker business did $33,000 and your hay lost $33,000.
How do you separate the hay from the land?
How do you separate the hay from the land?
Yeah.
There's two ways to do it. Two ways that I like to do it. There's probably more than two ways. You either buy the hay standing before you drive a swather in there at a price standing per ton, and then the land business pays the irrigation cost and the fertilizer cost and the labor cost to grow it. I like it better if you pay a cash lease per acre to the land business for irrigated ground, and then the hay business irrigates it, fertilizes it, labors to grow it. And the reason that is because there's some places where your costs to irrigate it for irrigation water, for electricity to run some kind of pump or diesel or whatever, your fertilizer cost, and all those things can be more than the hay's worth. And you got to know that, because if your land business is paying $100 to grow a ton of hay and you're selling it to your hay business for $50 a ton standing, well then you're essentially subsidizing that hay business with the land business.
How the line.
So I like it the second way I described, where you lease them to them for a flat cash lease per acre. What was the number you put up? 60 something per acre?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever a fair market value in your area might be, and then your hay business incurs all those other costs. The rule we use in doing this, you can be kind of loose in how you treat these things. Be sure you count everything once and nothing twice. If you're following that rule, probably pretty good, okay? So everything is somewhere. If you say, hey, I got this check I wrote, you can go back and find where that thing is, but it's not twice, okay? Because it can be easy to charge things twice sometimes if you're not careful, so. All right. So the reason I think this is important in drought decisions are, when we start looking at these enterprises, and we have enterprises that are strong and enterprises that are drains on the operation. In drought years, we're going to make decisions about which ones get made smaller. Okay? And we don't want to cut off the strongest arm that's really pulling the weight on the ranch. Okay? What I showed you is 1 year snapshot numbers, and this is a drought year on this 2012 ranch. So if that's all the information we had, we might make a bad decision on this. Okay? And we might say, hey, let's go in and let's obviously get rid of the hay, let's obviously get rid of the cows, and next year let's run 20,000 stockers, okay? Maybe that's the right decision, but we don't know, because we need more information on this. So it'd be nice to say, okay, let's look at 5-year returns on this. If we said 5-year returns were 30,000 here, 60,000 here, let's say this was a minus 15,000, and this one normally generated 80,000 to the bottom line of the range. And those are our 5-year returns, then we can start making some more informed decisions. Yes, sir.
Are your stockers at that age, are they feedlot ready? Is that your buyer? Who's the buyer?
It would, in this type of operation, probably be a little variable. So like in years like this year when we sold them in June, they might only be weighing 6.5, 7, probably 6.5. You know, in other years when we're selling them off grass at 8, somewhere in there, then we might.
So they've got to idle somewhere. That's quite an expense to idle them until
Yeah.
the fall.
Yeah, they wouldn't go back to grass, not because
No.
their age would kick them out. They'd have to go to the feedlot.
Yeah.
As stockers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a tougher age to feed. I mean, as far as health goes.
They'll be a little more than the Irvings. They'll be good growers. Okay, well, they'll be fine.
We're seeing a lot more of this.
Oh, yeah.
Price of corn is driving it.
And that's an easy fix for you in a drought year. That's a real easy fix. You just knock them out early.
Yeah, they can go to Japan.
You know, to kill your cow-calf operation there's nothing left next year.
Yeah.
So that's a harder decision.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what a lot of our guys are facing this year is we've got the ranch stocked with pretty much cows, straight cows, and here we hit a drought where we only produce 10 to 20% of the grass we normally do. Well, it goes to town, and you know, when those cows are the only thing standing there, it's pretty hard to send them. So an operation like this has more flexibility to it. So that's what I think the first step is when you start thinking about these drought decisions is, okay, first of all, let's figure out which operation's pulling the weight. Now, if we looked at these numbers, there's some obviously strong operations here, aren't they? Okay. Land business is generally a positive business. That one we need that one to support these other ones, okay? Unless we're going out and doing everything on a cash lease basis, and we don't own land, and we can just lob that one off. And the rest of these are paying fair market value. That cows versus stockers one, that's an interesting one, because it's not as simple as it looks to look at those numbers, is it? When you think about economic efficiency of those businesses, okay, how many AUMs have you invested to return $30,000? How many AUMs of your ranch have you invested to return $60,000? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? We went ahead and did that calculation here on this spreadsheet for this year, which is going to look a little different. If I brought up last year's, it might be a little more. So what I did is total AUMs invested, even after we cut the cow herd by a good chunk, we invested 2,600 AUMs into this cow-calf herd, okay? And that lost us $84,000. Running all those stockers till June this year, we invested 1,300 or 1,400 AUMs in those, and it made us $33,000. So our return per AUM. Let's look at a more typical year, because that's.
Do you
yes.
figure it? Do you figure your AUMs the same on the cow-calf pair as you do with the stock?
I do, yeah. An AUM is what, a 1,000-pound animal will eat. So if I've got a 600-pound stalker, it's a 0.6 AUM. If I've got a 1,200-pound cow with a 200-pound calf per side, she's a 1.4.
So you didn't do it just per head, you did it by
Yeah.
possible
We were
weights.
tried to be as fair as we could. I don't get down to the gnat's hair, but we get it pretty close. Let's see if I can jump to that without going too far here. We went to, let's go to the Lingle. You caught, wasn't that? Here we go. I'll probably have to close this one because it's not going to let me open two with the same name. Here we go. This would be a more typical situation for this ranch. This is the 2011 numbers. Okay, cow-calf returned $21,000. We invested 4,200 AUMs into that. Stockers returned $30,000. We invested 1,266 AUMs into that. So we take those numbers and we essentially do a measure of efficiency by what's the return per AUM invested. Our AUM is our unit of production on most ranches. Whether it's a ton of hay standing in the field or if it's 800 pounds of grass out on the rangeland, what business we choose to plug that into is our business choice. So look at those two economic efficiencies. Cow-calf is returning $5 per AUM invested. Stockers are returning $25 per AUM invested. Okay? Which of those do you think is going to be more variable over time as markets and things change? Stockers, we're really playing that buy-sell market, aren't we? Okay, if we get them priced right from our cow herd, and then we put them onto the market, hit a good lick like we did in 2012 on this ranch, it's going to be good. If we would have waited and marketed those 2 weeks later, okay, we could have had a pretty tough road on that stalker. So that's a consideration.
You could have locked in those prices.
Yeah, we sure could. We can talk about some of those. There's some really cool tools to use. I saw Jason, I think, is going to be talking about some future stuff too. Maybe another consideration is there some complementarity between these two enterprises on the ranch? If we have our own cows and we keep those calves, okay, we're not paying a truck to haul them. We're not buying them from the sale barn. We probably won't have death loss that's quite so bad. If we wean our own calves, maybe do a fence line wean at the ranch, those calves just get off that cow and start rocking and rolling. I mean, they're right there on the ranch, assuming we don't have any bad weather wrecks. Okay, so we don't have any marketing charges. If we were doing that business, this stalker business as a standalone without the cows, we'd probably add $15 in trucking. Okay, we might have some marketing charges to get those animals bought. Might have higher death loss on those things. Our stalker business probably would be near as profitable without that cow business on there. So you have to be aware of some of those things. I know a lot of cattlemen tend to put up hay as a risk protection strategy. Okay, they might know they could get it bought most years cheaper than they can raise it, but they say, you know what, I'm I'm gonna keep putting it up because in those bad years, I'm making my own. So if that's a business management decision you want to go into with your eyes wide open, that's fine. My suggestion is just know what it costs you, okay? Maybe this is a business, maybe they were making money here. A lot of the ranches I've analyzed this year, we had 2 ranch practicum schools this year, so I got to look at about 24 ranches this year. A lot of the ranches we analyzed this year, they had the best year ever in terms of returns on hay since I've been doing it. I mean, we had some really good winters. A lot of the guys had ample surface water supplies and raised pretty decent yields, and then we valued it in, even if they stuck in their own cows, $250, sometimes $300 a ton is what we valued that hay at. So when you put all that on the hay business, we had some good returns on our hay business this year. Okay? Oh, if we put that in our own cows, what did that do to our cow business? Really made it suffer. So here's what I'm suggesting is, if we're making drought management decisions, having this information provides us greater depth from which to decide, okay, we are in a drought, which one of these are we going to start getting rid of? And how do we do that? I think most ranchers would have said, if we'd hit the drought this year, okay, those stockers are an easy stopgap. We're going to pull the trigger on those as soon as we know there's a problem and send them to town. I think there's an interesting conversation to be had here for if that's the right decision, knowing that information, especially looking at the 5-year runs on these things. I think the stockers is, without question, the most profitable business on that ranch. Okay. Was it the right decision to get rid of them in a drought? Maybe it still was, because maybe they wouldn't have gained, maybe we can hold our cows together, those kind of things. I think there might have been an argument to be made, let's keep every heifer calf, every one of these baby calves that's in the stocker program, let's sell heavier into our cow herd, knowing that it's not a very profitable enterprise. And then we have more options with those heifer calves. We could breed them to replace that cow herd if things get good. We could sell them off grass in the fall. We could hold them over the winter. We've got a few more options with those stockers.
You could run your cow-calf operation on your hay meadows, offset the cost of producing the hay, knowing full well you would have to buy, but then you could, you'd have that option too, then to sell your calves earlier, or.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at that.
Yep, sure is.
But none of them are, traditionally, we go through the same scenario every year. We breed this month, we wean this month, and this is when we sell the calves. And, it's pretty tough to break those traditions.
It is.
To think beyond what we've done year after year and think, oh, it's going to get better next year. We've got to have 200 heifers to calve next spring. We aren't in business, that's tough.
Yeah, it sure is. That's right. That's right. So let's open up this conversation a little bit wider then. What, if you looked at a ranch, and let's talk about your neighbor's ranch again, because that one's easier to see. If we looked at your neighbor's ranch, what's the right balance of permanent livestock, something like cows, to something that's easily liquidated, something like stockers or cull cows? How much of the AUMs on your ranch in a average year, and I use the term average because no year is really average, right? How many of the AUMs on your ranch in an average year do you want to have tied up in cows?
Sure, not more than 3/4.
3/4?
Ideally.
Okay, I think that's a good suggestion to start. So if we looked at a ranch and we said, this ranch has 10,000 AUMs, you're thinking something like that, right? This would be cows,
Yep.
this would be other. Okay. That's a good place to start. How often do you have a drought? And a drought meaning a reduction of maybe 20% or less, 20% or more from average. Interesting, average and normal are not the same thing when you look at rainfall patterns. Normal is below average. We have more below average years than we have above average years. So when people say, oh, we got normal rain this year, oh, we got a below average year, good.
According to our earlier speaker, we never have them back-to-back.
Oh, is that right?
I
Yeah.
don't know how many.
No, it's
Yeah.
only in corn. Yeah. I wonder what, hay is in its second year nationally
High.
of lost production.
Hmm.
Hay is in the second year. It's finished 2 years.
headed for the third year, maybe.
Hmm.
So, corn, that's, but I don't know what's hay.
So what's the answer, 7 years?
What's that?
For drought, how often do you have?
How often do you have a drought? How many years out of 10 do you think you have a drought? Yeah. You thinking maybe 7? I don't know. Some numbers we were shown last week say 1 year out of 3 is a drought. If you look at long-term averages in the Mountain West of all the rain stations. So I don't know. I think that might be true. A 20% reduction and really when you're looking at drought on rangeland, we're looking at precip falling during those months of April, May, and June primarily. That's what's going to cause a drought. We don't get rain. It can rain in July and August. Doesn't really makes us feel a little better, but doesn't make a lot of difference on the rangeland. So, okay, so if we, and maybe your numbers are different, but I think that's a question everybody has to ask is how often should we expect a drought? So if we have 1 year out of 3 where we're going to be looking at a 25% reduction in the carrying capacity of our ranch, we have a few choices on that. We could stock the ranch lightly, okay, and just be understocked all 3 of those years so that when we had that bad year, it wouldn't hurt us too bad. Or we could have the ranch stocked closer to, and when I can say max stocking, I'm saying the maximum amount of animals you can have on the ranch still have good range condition and improving trends, okay? That's maximum stocked. I don't see maximum stocked as we're getting every blade of grass and the range is looking like crap. That's not good. I think all you guys would agree with that. So if we stock the ranch to its capacity, meaning the rangeland's still improving some, we're doing good. In order to do that, we'd have to have some level of flexible livestock on the ranch that we can pull a trigger on. So the gentleman here suggested 25, 75, 25. I think that's pretty close. I would challenge you probably 60-40. Okay. I think you need to be somewhere like that, where this is other, and this is cows. Let's run the numbers on that so you can see what that looks like. If we've got, how long most of you guys graze out? 9-10 months a year? Some of you higher than that, lower than that? What's the average in the area?
You're not 9, aren't you?
8, 9.
8, 9? Okay. All right.
A couple of ifs involved.
A couple of ifs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. So let's say we've got a 1,200 pound cow. So she's going to be a 1.2 AUM. And for how many of those months? She calves in May, and 5 months she's going to have a calf on her. Let's say over the whole 12 months, if we put that calf on her for a few months out of the year, let's call her a 1.3, 1.4 for all the 12 months, okay? If we count that calf, so let's say she's a 1.4, and she's grazing out for 9 months out of the year, okay? Somebody punch that up for me. How many AUMs is she taking a year? What's that?
12.6, isn't it?
12.6?
Or is it 13.6?
13.6. Okay, all right, so that's her number of AUMs. If we're running a stalker in a, let's say we're doing a winter out type of deal with a stalker, that calf comes in, what's that?
12.6.
12.6, okay, thanks. 12.6. Let's say that calf comes in at 0.45 and it goes out at 0.8, okay, so we'll take an average of those two. So we'll call it a 0.6 during the year. So if we say this, just like that ranch did on November 1, we wean these calves, they go into a stalker operation, graze out most all winter long, a little bit of protein supplement, sold off grass mid to late summer as an 8 weight. So we're going to call them 0.6 for a 12-month grazing season. Okay, so that's 0.7? 7.2. Okay. So see the comparison I'm making? Oh, 7.2, right? Mm-hmm. Sorry. 7.2. Okay. So you got to have about 2 of these critters to be the same as one of those critters on a 12-month deal. Okay. This one's grazing out 12 months. This one's grazing out 9 months. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make, if we're getting close to 60-40, if we have 300 cows and we keep every calf we're still not at 60-40, okay? We're still somewhere around that 70-30. 30% of our AUMs are in stockers, 70% of our AUMs are in cows, keeping every calf from a cow-calf stocker operation. Okay? Yeah.
Every ranch is gonna vary quite differently too with wildlife, isn't it?
Mhm.
I knew I figured that in.
Yeah, how much you want to leave, what the winter grazing situation is going to be. Yep. All those. And I think a big question is how variable is your forage supply? If your forage supply is strictly entirely based on dryland, rangeland stuff, that really, if we don't get rain those months, you're completely out of luck. I think this might need to be closer to 40, 60. Okay? If your forage supply is based on a pretty consistent supply of runoff water or something like that, sure, we might be able to push that to 80, 20, something there. But I think those are questions we need to wrestle with. Yes, sir.
You know, the other part of the equation we really haven't talked about is where's your debt load at with this operation? And obviously, everybody's gonna try to maintain that land, but that's also the most expensive part, if you purchase land of that whole operation. I think you can sacrifice cattle, because they're liquid assets, you can sacrifice hay, but nobody really wants to sacrifice that land, or that lease agreement you've got with the Forest Service somewhere that you've got for another 75 years that you know you'll never get again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things that you have to look at that too. I've seen a lot of operations where they've gone and instead of stocking their calves in the winter, they sold their stockers and then they sold their calves in November as well, in order to maintain what forage was left for their cow-calf. But then it screwed them up on their taxes, which it plays a big part of the rancher's operation.
It sure does.
So,
I think those are all good points. I gave that breakdown thing, and I had an accountant in the room, and he said, I might rather be that ranch that makes 20,000 on my cows than the ranch that makes 100,000 on a cow-calf stocker deal for tax reasons. I find that hard to believe that it's that big a difference in income taxes, the way they treat breeding livestock versus, because I've got cow depreciation worked in there, and I think that was one thing he was thinking, is he was taking depreciation on cows on top of that loss. And I've already got that worked in there. But
But, trying to think of, can you buy and make it come out?
can you buy
The stockers.
the stockers? It's budgeted in there to buy them.
to-
And I think I've even got financing budgeted in
they
there.
bought them from their own operation.
But
No,
this-
I didn't put financing in there because I didn't finance the value of the cows too, so I wanted to compare apples to apples. If we wanted to put in financing with the stockers, then I'd put in financing against the cows.
But you know, if you lose the land, I mean, if you sacrifice land, then of course you've got to sacrifice everything else to get to that point. So, yeah.
You're
I
allowed
think
to,
it's gonna be easier to send mom to town to work, so it's gonna be.
but you're allowed what, you got buyback on cows, what do you got, 18 months?
For tax purposes?
Yeah.
This year it's even longer with the drought exemptions.
Yeah.
They're gonna give you 4 years, I think. Yeah. That's interesting. I would challenge you though, I think oftentimes a lot of bad business decisions are made to avoid taxes. And I think make sound business decisions first. And what a great problem to have to pay taxes every year because you made so damn much money. I think that's my opinion on it.
We're stretching our thinking now, guys.
Yeah. All right, so that's one thing I wanted to leave you with, is I think there's some strategies on this. Are there options beyond stockers? I think so. What would some of those be?
At least you're ground out to your neighbor from right
Okay,
inside his cow.
do some take-in cows. Take-in cows on good years. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm taking in cows. In fact, I just found out the other day I've got a couple hundred coming in March to calve out, so woohoo.
Texas still putting out a lot of cows, looking for homes?
I think so. There's a lot of places. I worked with a big ranch down in Rawlins this year, and they had 1,000 cows they'd like to move somewhere. Somebody take them. And we were talking $30 a month is what they were looking at going with for dry cows. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we were, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, right up here to do that. That's why I have a little trouble when I start saying, okay, what do we want to charge your cows for grazing your land? Everybody's like, oh, $15 a month. Here's a guy waiting right here that says he'll send you a cow and he'll pay you 30. Why are we giving your cows a free ride? I think we need to charge ourselves fair market value and see if if our own cow herd can pay fair market value for that. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Look at taking cows on good years. I think one strategy is too, especially when we start looking at this business as a land business, cow business, we got to be able to take advantage of these good years. There's years when we have 25% more forage production than average years. So on those years, well, so does everybody else, okay? So maybe there's not much of a market here, but maybe there's always somebody that's dry, isn't there? So start marketing yourself. And, hey, bring them up here. Yeah, it'll cost you $100 to get here and home on a truck, but
Yeah, but once you make that relationship, though, that gives them a chance to expand, perhaps, knowing you're here, and they change their.
right.
Another drastic option would be selling cows and make hay.
Yep. Okay. We could reduce cows and make more hay.
They ain't gonna work.
I think this year it might.
Well, and
Very well.
to piggyback that, I think you can sell the hay in a profitable year like this year. And in our travels, I've come across a lot of people that feed cattle for a living, that feed my cows with distillers and stuff a lot cheaper than I can at home.
Then you can't home.
So take the cows somewhere else, say the hay, sell the hay. on your
We'll send the
place.
cows to camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Send cows to camp in bad years.
I've been selling the hay and feeding the cows on my place. Keep the nutrition there.
Keep the nutrients on the ground.
Little trucking of the hay.
There's a lot of sense to that. I really appreciated your thing. What Gareth says, and I really latched on this, he said, for some of these guys that figure out their hay business is not profitable, he says it's more important to stop making hay than it is to stop feeding hay. Think about that, because essentially what he's saying is just what you said. If you don't want to stop feeding hay, you can still buy hay and bring their nutrients onto your place. And then you're not sending your nutrients out. That's interesting.
Didn't he put a value of $70 an acre on
Where's
that?
it going?
Bring hay,
Yeah, $70 a ton.
a ton, yeah.
I was just talking, that was at the hay thing here, and he says, you know, if I buy 2 ton of hay for my cows every 4 years, I'll replace that 15% that I'm using at this 90% or 85%.
Of the nutrients?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
are lost, only 15% are lost if you feed on your own place.
On your own place.
And he says, if I buy 2 ton every 4 years, I've replaced that.
Yeah.
And then just have a few more miles to run to.
Yeah.
I wasn't here. How does that reason out? Is that through manure? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. If you've got a piece of ground and you're putting up hay and then sending it off, you're essentially mining nutrients to some degree. So the opposite holds. If you've got your cows standing here and you're bringing hay on, feeding it through your cows, you're adding nitrogen, phosphorus, all those kind of things. It only really works if you're nutrient deficient in something. So if you're, if you're in a nice productive site and can benefit from nitrogen on grass, it'll show benefit. If you're not deficient in that, or the site's not productive enough to use it, there's no benefit.
But if it's land that has traditionally sold crops, it's deficient.
Probably so. Especially in organic matter and some of those kind of things.
What's organic?
I've been able to charge $24 a month per AUM,
Okay,
and I'm feeding about 20 pounds a day for 12 to 1,300 pounds.
okay,
So you get paid for feeding some pasture, but you gotta keep your hay there.
yeah,
Plus I sold the hay for $150 a ton,
all right,
old grass native.
good,
Another option.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
They say it takes what, about $25 a ton to feed? Your cost?
Yeah.
Get it up.
Yeah,
Cheap and boiling.
depends on where you're feeding, I guess.
Yeah, something, whatever, there's a cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking of this, okay, again, let's think about a traditional ranch, or if you guys have integrated operations and want to keep this 60-40 split, I think there's a lot of advantage with the cull cows. Typically, most ranches preg check and sell their cull cows in the fall. If you look at a coal cow market, we could bring it up and look at a seasonality of that coal cow market. When's the lowest price for coal cows? In the fall.
Well, it's pretty much the same as the feeder calf market.
Okay. The difference is the coal cow market is almost always seasonally that way, where the feeder calf market has variations year to year. 18 out of 20 years, so 9 out of 10, the coal cow market was low in the fall and then starts ticking up right after the first of the year. March is about the time that thing peaks. So if you're looking at a way to increase your flexibility in terms of some stock that can be easily liquidated during those years of drought and take advantage of grass. So what if we get to November and you've got grass left, you know you're not going to use it all. Preg check those cows, take them right back out, okay? And then overwinter. What can an open cow do on dry rangeland grass in the wintertime? Okay? Especially if you give her a pound of cake every other day or something.
Especially if a fourth of them drop a calf for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Which they do. I mean, a lot of them do go to town that are pregnant.
So maybe have a long breeding season and a short calving season and take those cows and maybe they'll make somebody's fall calvers or something like that. Yes.
Both my cows in March, is that right?
What's that?
Rains the high in March. March is when you wanna sell them?
That's typically when the market peaks. Let's bring that up and look at it.
What's gonna happen this year though, to that March market with the shrinking?
We've sent so many coal cows to town already, there's not a very good coal market right
I
now.
think it's already gone.
At least that's what I've thought. What's your number showing you?
This is just me speculating, guys. When it rains somewhere where their cows are, this thing is gonna go wild. Texas, Corn Belt, Missouri, watch those areas. Oklahoma's type country. When it rains somewhere where there's cows, watch out, things are gonna take off. I think right now there's some pessimism with the plant closing and that kind of stuff, short-term pessimism. That's just me talking though. I'm not a, oh shoot, I don't have a internet connection here. Quinn, is there an easy way to get on this one or, let me turn my phone on.
Honestly, don't know.
You know what, I bet I could bring it up in this presentation. We've got, here we go. Okay, there's corn, steers. Yeah, there we go, right there. Okay, this is from, he mentioned Bridger Fates at lunch today. Dylan Fates has a website, cattlemarketanalysis.org, and he's got market charts on there. So what he shows on here, this is the 5-year average. This is last year. And then as we start getting into the year, you see that red dot right there, this will be this year. And he only updates these about every 2 weeks to a month or so. So you'll start seeing that line stretch out as this year starts playing out. It probably went like that. Okay. But that black line there, see there we go, preg check time, right? Look what that thing does right there. And then it just stays down there. So if we have this one here, if our 5-year average is somewhere between 55 and 60, okay, let's say we have a 57 in the fall, and we were able to hold that cow till March, somebody suggested, okay? Then we can be right up here at 65. Okay, somebody get your calculator out for me. What's this coal cow weigh in the fall after we just weaned her calf that day? What's that?
1,100.
1,100, okay. 1,100 pound coal cow. Let's keep her, let's say that's November 1, so let's go November, December, January, February. Let's go 4 months on her. We'll budget in a pound of a 30% cake on her, and let's take her out to March 1. How much is she going to gain a day with a weaned calf, assuming she's an open cow or a late gestation?
Should I increase two?
2? I think she could probably do 2, okay. So how many, 4 times 30? 112, so 240, right?
Yeah.
240 pounds, so now she's 1340. What's the difference in price there? 57 cents a pound, 65 cents a pound.
Of course, that's gross, not net.
Right.
You'd have to figure out what.
Let's charge her some.
871 for the second one.
871.
Yep.
627 for the top.
244 is the difference.
Thank you. So we're going to charge her 4 months of grass at $25 a month. Let's charge her $100 of grass. And how much in cake? Pound a day, another 120 pounds, not much. You know, I don't know what, 15 bucks, okay? So we've got $115 in her, maybe we lost a couple, okay? Made $244 on her for holding her over those months. That's being pretty conservative, using 5-year averages, okay? I think that's very realistic. Guys, most ranches I work with make $50 a cow a year. We can take this cull cow and make almost 150 bucks on her, 120. Yeah. Okay. I think there's some real opportunity, and I think the benefit is it provides us a little more of this. In good years, we do that. There's grass out there, kick her out. Let her have it, okay? It's a drought year, she's open, she goes. Okay? And I think there's different levels of cows. You know, you got your hard culls, lumps and bumps, bad leg, those kind of things, they're gone. Then you got the ones that are just open, no reason why, just kick them out. Do some of this stuff on them, okay? I think it might provide you some opportunity to use some of the grass in the good years. Maybe not stock the ranch quite to capacity if that's where you're at right now. Give you a little more flexibility. So if we start looking at those things, okay, so we've got a cow-calf stocker operation, we've got a cow-calf stocker operation where we're going to keep some cull cows over. I think we can start pushing this 60-40 idea. Keep our stock the ranch to maximum capacity with improving range condition. I think that's a key to profitability. You'll have range guys up here telling you all day, oh, let's leave a big chunk of grass out there. Okay, let's graze it right. Let's graze it the right time of the year, but let's get every blade of grass we can use and still have the range be an improving range condition. That's my bias on it. Because if we're leaving it all out there on the table, I don't think we're going to have a hard time making these things profitable. There's probably some of my colleagues that would shoot me for saying that.
We're not gonna have anybody out making calves if we keep promoting these kind of numbers, are we?
Yeah, that's right. That's the truth. Beef production's gonna
Have a business.
drop off. Yeah. What other ideas? Let's flip through some of these. That's an interesting one. Historic cattle prices. We looked a little bit about this at lunch. I think sometimes we can, and I get caught in this too. If you look back in January, you could afford priced fall calves for this year at $1.75 for fall feeder calves. You could have taken price protection on them. Now it's probably 10 cents off of that. And so we kind of get thinking, oh man, this thing's really come down, you know. I think we have to keep these historical perspectives in mind. We are still at record high prices in this business, guys.
Yeah, but couldn't you also say you're at record high costs with
Mhm.
gasoline, with hay, with just the cost of the animals, you know, where you're buying the cows?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's,
I'd say profitability was probably peaked last year on most ranches, at least in this area. The drought threw a wrench in that. If you guys had good grass, I think we could have still participated in that. Here's an interesting thing. If we're thinking about stock or yearlings, what time are we done? On this one? 3:40? So we got another 10 minutes. As you think about what type of operation you want to have, cow-calf versus stocker, I think we have to keep some trends in mind and what's driving these things. The stocker business is essentially a cost of gain business, okay? When you think about cow-calf production, it's what's your cost of production, what's the value of that calf. When we think about stocker business, you have to change your mind a little bit. It's very much a value of the gain and a cost of gain. It's a margin business. So what drives the value of the gain, okay? Here's an interesting little formula. Cost of gain equals the corn price times 0.155. So if you have $6 corn, take that times 0.155, and that'll essentially tell you what the market is paying to put a pound of gain on a stocker. So we have to realize that the value and the cost of gain and value of gain are directly linked. These markets, it's interesting to watch that thing travel. As the price of corn goes up, the market is going to pay you more to put pounds on calves outside of the feedlot. It's not rocket science, right? Okay. So have to ask yourself, where do you think corn is trending? And if you think corn's gonna continue to climb and gonna continue to hover around that $5 to $6 range, there's huge opportunities in stockers. You can't touch the profitability of stockers with cow-calf operations, not when the price of corn is like that. I don't know how you can do it. We run cow budgets all day. Charge a cow $25 a month to graze, price her in hay at $200, charge her $200 cow depreciation, there's $100 left on the table for running a cow for a year. I don't know how you do it, okay? Do the same thing on stockers, price them in, take price protection in the futures market at some point so there's no price risk. You can make that stocker do $100, no sweat. And that stocker takes half the grass that cow does. So that's my bias, is I think the opportunity right now is so tremendous in stockers that we can't ignore it. This was done for that August meeting, so we essentially just took, the way you do this is just like we did on that cow, take the price of them, times their current market value, how much per head, okay? So if a 5 weight's worth 735, a 6 weight's worth 858, the market's paying you $123 to put 100 pounds on it, so the value of the gain is $1.23, okay? So you can look at those different classes of cattle and you see what the market's saying in terms of which one is the most valuable one to add gain to. Not that that's necessarily the one you need to own, but it's interesting. So the value of the gain was around $1 this summer. So essentially the market's going to pay you $1. So we took, again, this example ranch, a 300 cow-calf ranch, looked at the same thing we just did here, and the cows made $8,100 in that, and the same amount of stockers based on the same AUMs return that. That's essentially what it's saying is that the market's going to pay you with high corn prices to put gain on stockers. I realize all the downsides to running stockers, guys. The fence issues, the control issues, the labor issues, where you're running them might play into it. The price risk is a big one, and a lot of especially the old timers will tell you, I knew so and so that ran stockers, he's not in business anymore. Okay, and I think there's some truth to that. Interesting thing is there's some really cool tools to manage price risk on stockers. Livestock risk protection is one of them. If you haven't seen livestock risk protection, you're missing. If you type in Google the letters RMA for Risk Management Agency, because they're the ones that deal with it, and then LRP. So type those 3 letters in Google spaced by one thing. First hit on there will be livestock risk protection. You can go on that website and pull up what you could forward price caps for today in the different markets that they're selling for and see what it would cost you to take that price protection. Okay? Since I told you back in January you could lock them in at $1.75, and I think it was going to cost you 5 cents to do that. So essentially you're protecting $1.70. Okay? I think if you're going to be in the stocker business, you have to do something like this, unless you've got $10 million sitting in the bank you're willing to play with. If that's not your case, which probably most of us aren't, do something like this and take the price risk off the table. I budget this kind of stuff in every stocker budget we run. I usually use $25 a head is what it's going to cost us to buy price protection on them. And then we run it, build in all the financing right up front, all the cost of the money, and if it makes sense, do it.
You can kind of figure your debt loss into there too, can't you, because of your pounds now.
Because of what?
The pounds that don't leave your place.
Yeah.
So you kind of can insure.
I don't know that you can insure that there's a separate insurance policy for death loss. I've never really priced them to see their efficacy, but when you buy the LRP, you choose how many pounds you'd like to protect at what price. So you say, I want to protect 100 head of 8-weight stockers for August delivery. And then you buy that price on the board. You don't have to sell those cattle that day, but you bought a price protection point on that day. It's kind of weird to think about this price protection stuff when you get into it, but it's cool. It works. It's cool stuff. Yeah.
What do you use for an average on an irrigated lagoon grass mixture pasture gain, average gain on stockers?
Average gain on stockers?
I mean, I know there's all kinds.
Yeah, it would be.
Winter or summer?
Summer.
What do you guys think? 2, 2.5? Is that 3? Average gain on stockers? Okay.
3.
You're right on with your cows, too.
I think it,
Maybe more than that.
you could do it with phosphorus block.
there'd probably be guys getting 1.5, and there'd probably be guys getting 4.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And the cattle, genotype of the cattle and everything else.
Just remember with stockers, and I know I've talked too much here, but
No, I'm enjoying
if you buy stockers, there's a reason they're open.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're planning on coming back with cow-calf later, or you're planning on using your bulls to breed these cows, to add a little weight to those stockers at the end of the year, you know, one of the main things that we fight in this area is trick.
Mhm.
For goodness sakes, you better prepare for that kind of a risk, and don't bring it into your cow herd, because that's maybe the reason they're open.
Yeah, good
So
point.
diseases have to be watched
Yeah.
carefully.
There's a lot of that stuff to consider, you bet. Yeah. I hope I'm not sitting down here sounding like an advocate for something. What I'm hoping to do is get you thinking, how do you get, that's one of the big challenges of ranching in this environment, is we've got these huge variations in forage production. But in order to be profitable, you have to position yourself to take advantage of the good years and to be able to absorb those bad years. And I think that's a big challenge to us. So how you do that, whether it's using stockers, whether it's doing this cold cow thing, whether you become a goat or alpaca farmer, those are all different strategies to do it, so. Yeah. All right, I think I've used my time. Thanks, guys, appreciate it.
Big piney.